On the 6th of November 1989, at 6:45 p.m., an actor took his last breath in a private London hospital. Julian Croft was 40 years old. He was the man who had electrified Britain with a single, guttural cry of, "What's all this then?" A charismatic actor who became a national icon. He was the rebellious detective in the TV series London's Finest, the brooding anti-hero in the film Chronicles of a Detective, and the formidable gangster who took on Hollywood in Crimson Tide. That day, a woman stood outside the hospital, unable to enter. She was not a stranger. She was his first wife, the woman who had shared a decade of her life with Julian Croft. Inside the hospital room was his second wife, along with their 3 children. The first wife and her daughter could only wait outside. The daughter's name was Chloe. She was 12 years old and had just started secondary school. The last time she had spoken to her father was on the phone. "Work hard on your exams," he had said. Those would be his final words to her. He had promised to bring her a present back from New York, but that promise would never be kept. The world remembers Julian Croft as a charismatic star, but he carried a secret he could never tell, a secret he had resolved to take to his grave. And there was one person who knew that secret from the very beginning. It was not his second wife. It was his first wife, Eleanor. She knew everything before Julian Croft ever became a star. She knew, and she kept silent. She knew, and she continued to support him. And then, she was betrayed. On the 24th of December 1981, Christmas Eve, the day before their daughter's birthday, the two filed for divorce. Yet, a strange tradition formed. Even after the divorce, the 3 of them, father, mother, and daughter, continued to meet every Christmas. They did this without fail from 1982 to 1988. Their last meeting was in December 1988 for Chloe's 12th birthday. 11 months later, Julian Croft was gone. A decade later, Eleanor decided to write everything down. The secret her husband had hidden his entire life, the secret she had guarded, and the secret that her daughter would have to bear. Why did Julian Croft try to take his secret to the grave? Why did Eleanor, even after being betrayed, continue to meet him every Christmas? And why does their daughter, Chloe, still hide the fact that she is Julian Croft's daughter? To find the answers, we must go back in time and travel to the city of Liverpool, to a time when Julian Croft was still known as Finn O'Malley. The place where he was born was no ordinary home. On the 21st of September 1949, in Liverpool, a baby boy was born. His mother's name was Moira, a first-generation Irish traveler. Moira already had 2 sons from a previous husband, a man who had died during the war. The father of her 3rd child was a man named Connolly, a charming but violent figure who stood over 6 feet tall. He was 39 at the time. However, Connolly had a wife and children back in Belfast, a fact Moira did not know. When Moira became pregnant, Connolly fled back to Ireland and was never heard from again. Finn never once saw his father's face. On his birth certificate, he was registered as illegitimate. Finn O'Malley was a fatherless child. Moira had to raise 3 children alone. To make ends meet, she ran a boarding house. She would rent the upstairs rooms to women who would bring strange men back with them. Young Finn, barely old enough to understand, etched these scenes into his memory. The women from upstairs, the unfamiliar men, and his own mother. One day, Finn locked his bedroom door, knowing a man was coming to see his mother. But his mother came downstairs and slapped him across the face. Years later, Julian would recount, "When I knew one of them was coming, I'd lock the door so I couldn't see. Then my mom would come down and hit me. I hated it. I just thought, what am I? It would have been better if I had never been born." The moment his mother ceased to be a mother and became just a woman was a thorn that pierced the young boy's heart. In 1958, when Finn was 9, societal crackdowns began to close many of Liverpool's gray area establishments. But the memories of those 9 years could not be erased. In primary school, Finn was unruly and wild. Classmates avoided him. He had almost no friends. He was always alone. His 2 older brothers had a different father. He slowly began to realize that he was the odd one out. His own father was just a man who had appeared and then vanished. A man whose name he didn't even know. This is not where I belong, the young boy began to think. As a child, Finn believed he was just like any other English boy. He only learned of his Irish traveler heritage much later. In Liverpool, there was a grand cinema. Stars like Richard Burton and Albert Finney shone on the silver screen during the height of British kitchen sink drama. For young Finn, the cinema was his only escape. The time spent lost in the world on screen was his only moment of light and life. He idolized Albert Finney. One day, I want to be in that world, he thought. But it was a distant dream. How could a boy with his background, born in such a place, ever have a future like that? When he turned 18, his mother, Moira, told him, "Go to America, become a lawyer." He was to stay with his maternal aunt. Before his departure, Finn went to an office to collect his travel documents. It was there, looking at the papers, that he saw it for the first time. His family name, his background, officially documented. He was not just English, he was a traveler. What did the boy feel in that moment? Finn dropped out of his secondary school in Liverpool and set off for America. He never had many fond memories of the city. He would never return there to live. His mother told him to become a lawyer in America, but it was not the world of law that awaited him. In a small city in California, Finn moved in with his aunt and uncle and enrolled in a local high school. But shortly after his arrival, his aunt and uncle began bitter divorce proceedings. The language barrier, the family turmoil, Finn was utterly alone. In September 1968, without telling his mother, Finn dropped out of the American high school. Before returning to England, he witnessed something that changed his life. A performance by an avant-garde theater troupe from New York. A world like this exists, he thought, his eyes shining. In the Liverpool cinema, he had only been a spectator looking at the screen. But on that stage, there were people just like him. He could be on the performing side, not the watching side. I want to act, he decided. He returned to London and crashed at an acquaintance's flat. He re-enrolled in a night school to finish his education. A young man, born in poverty, who had dropped out of school twice, was now studying again by night. Around this time, he went to the home of the famed director Lindsay Anderson, hoping to become his apprentice. He waited outside the director's house for 3 days, but he was never granted a meeting. As he was turned away, Finn declared, "I don't care if it takes my whole life, I will become famous. But no matter how famous I get, I will never appear in one of your films." He would never forget the anger of that rejection. In 1971, he auditioned for the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA. He failed the first round, the written exam. He was rejected for his writing, not his acting. After failing to get into RADA, Finn looked for another drama group. He joined a small, experimental fringe theater company. Had he been accepted into RADA, his life might have taken a completely different path. Around the same time, Finn was working as a bartender in a pub in Soho. There, he met an actor who, after losing a game of cards to Finn, introduced him as a forfeit to a television producer. The producer was impressed by Finn's raw talent and fearless energy. His commitment to the craft was visceral. His confidence almost aggressive, he recalled. The crew was blown away by his powerful performance. A contemporary actress who was at RADA at the time described the young Finn as like a big, skinny, malnourished dog. In 1973, his life changed dramatically. He was cast as the maverick detective in the hit television series London's Finest. But Finn had a problem he needed to solve: his past. With his traveler background, he lived in constant fear of being exposed. He began the process of legally changing his name and erasing his history. To do this, he wrote a heartfelt letter to the authorities. That letter still exists. Since July of this year, I have been a regular cast member on the popular television program, London's Finest. It's a show that families enjoy, with a wide audience from children to adults. I have gained many fans who support me. Currently, I am using the professional name Julian Croft, so even those on the show are unaware. But if it were to become known that I come from an Irish traveler background, I believe everyone would be deeply disappointed. The children, especially, would feel as if their dreams have been betrayed. This single paragraph encapsulates everything about Julian. As a child, he believed he was like everyone else. But when he saw his official documents, that dream was shattered. He did not want his young fans to experience the same disillusionment. So, he would hide it. He would take it to his grave. That was Julian Croft's resolve. In July 1973, London's Finest began to air. The character of the rough-around-the-edges detective became an overnight sensation. And in January 1974, that character was dramatically killed off. In his death scene, shot and clutching his stomach, Julian screamed, "What's all this then?" The line wasn't in the script. It was an ad-lib. It was a phrase straight from the streets of Liverpool, the accent he had tried so hard to suppress, the language of the hometown he had fled. He hid his heritage, he hid his upbringing, he hid his accent. But the most famous line of his career was a cry from his hometown. The secret was slipping out of his own mouth. It's just that nobody noticed. Who was it that helped Julian erase his past? It was the father of a woman he had met at the Fringe Theatre Company. A month before Julian joined, a young woman had also become a member. She too came from a background far from London's elite circles, though a different kind. Her name was Eleanor Vance. A graduate of a prestigious university and a former beauty pageant winner, she was an actress working under a stage name. Her father was a powerful conservative MP with connections to a former prime minister, the well-bred lady and the young man from the Liverpool slums. The two fell in love, and by June 1971, they were living together in a small flat in Kensington. After about 6 months, Eleanor's mother came to visit from the countryside and discovered her daughter was living with a man. Her mother dispatched a male relative to London to investigate this Julian Croft. The investigation revealed everything: his illegitimate birth, the fact that his family home was essentially a brothel that had run-ins with the police, and his traveler background. For the daughter of a prominent family, his history was unthinkable. Julian had once said to Eleanor, "If you knew the truth, you'd run away from me. You'd definitely run." She had to either trust him completely and accept everything, or leave. Knowing the results of the investigation, Eleanor made her decision. She would say nothing to Julian. She would not let him know that she knew. Just as Julian carried a secret, Eleanor now carried one of her own. "I know, but I will never tell you." That was her form of love. In the social climate of the time, prejudice against the traveler community was severe. For the daughter of an MP to be with such a man was something her family should have found unacceptable. But Eleanor chose to stay by his side. Their life together continued. Eleanor continued her acting career while supporting Julian. Then, in 1973, things began to move. Julian was cast in London's finest. To secure the role and build a public profile, he needed a clean slate. He asked Eleanor for help. "I have to do this. Please, help me." Eleanor spoke to her father. The MP had deep connections within the establishment. Using his influence, Julian's juvenile records were expunged and his name change was officially fast-tracked. In December 1973, Finn O'Malley officially became Julian Croft. The father of a high-society daughter had turned the boy from the Liverpool slums into a new man. That was the beginning of the name Julian Croft. One night around this time, Julian's older brother came to visit their flat. Eleanor was lying down in the next room. She could hear the brothers' conversation. The brother asked, "Did you tell her about our background?" Julian replied, "She knew it all before I ever said a word." After his brother left, Julian woke Eleanor. He said, "You knew, and you still stayed with me?" Julian was crying. He held Eleanor and wept. It was the first time the man who had lived his life burdened by secrets had ever felt truly accepted by someone. He had thought she would leave. He thought it would be over if she found out, but she had known, and she had stayed. On the 21st of September 1975, after 4 years of living together, they were officially married. Eleanor retired from acting upon their marriage. On the 25th of December 1976, their daughter was born. They named her Chloe. Julian's career was on the rise. Eleanor managed the home. Stars like Sir Lawrence Finch, a legendary actor of his generation, became frequent visitors to their house. It should have been the beginning of a happy family, but a dark incident had already occurred that same year. On the 19th of July 1975, at a wrap party for a film, a drunk Julian assaulted a 19-year-old university student. In January 1976, he was charged with assault. The verdict came down on March 10, a 10-month suspended sentence with 3 years probation. Julian was forced to step away from the public eye for a year. The person who saved him during this time was Sir Lawrence Finch. The established star submitted a letter to the court, vouching for Julian's character. The star he had admired on the cinema screen in Liverpool was now helping him in his time of need. Julian returned to acting in a film about youth violence. It was a strange irony that an actor who had committed a violent act was making his comeback in a film with that very theme. After his return, Julian declared he would no longer work in television. But Sir Lawrence Finch came to him personally and persuaded him to accept a role in a new crime drama. Twice, the great actor had saved him. Sir Lawrence was a frequent guest at their home, coming for Eleanor's home-cooked meals. Another frequent visitor was a co-star from London's finest, a rising actor named Daniel. Daniel later recalled, When he'd invite me over, we'd talk until the middle of the night. Julian would be drinking, and since I don't drink, I'd have coffee and snack on the food Eleanor made. We never talked about difficult acting theories or work. We'd just tell jokes and laugh. He was truly my best friend. Eleanor also remembered their bond. Julian in his youth was quick to fight and had a difficult side, but he never once clashed with Daniel. Eleanor adapted her cooking to suit Julian's demanding preparations for roles. When he was cast in the 1980 film Savage, he needed to lose a significant amount of weight. Eleanor managed his diet, but that wasn't all. To make his face appear more gaunt, Julian had 4 of his back teeth removed. He then went into seclusion to immerse himself in the role. Eleanor could control his meals, but she couldn't stop her husband from pulling out his own teeth. Julian Croft was a man no one could stop. When Julian was in the 1st grade, a bicycle accident had severely damaged his right kidney, leaving him with only 1 functioning kidney for the rest of his life. Because of this, he had a habit of taking long, hot baths to sweat and reduce the strain on his remaining kidney. He cut his own hair and gave himself cheap perms. If a film had a love scene, he would tell Eleanor, "Don't watch it." In the home frequented by stars, Eleanor continued to cook and support him. The cover of his 1982 album featured an illustration of his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe. At that time, there was genuine happiness in their home, but the cracks had already begun to form in 1979. That year, Julian began filming Chronicles of a Detective. On set, he met a young woman named Isabella. She was 17, perhaps just turning 18, still in school. On the first day of shooting, Isabella went to the wrong location and was late. Rushing and apologizing, she made her way through the crew to Julian and said, "I'm so sorry." Julian wasn't angry. "It's all right. Don't panic. Take a deep breath," he said, and then he pulled her into a tight hug. He had embraced a woman he had just met. Julian said of Isabella, "She's the most eccentric woman I've ever seen. I can't stay away from her." He started picking her up from her school in his car. A 30-year-old man waiting at the school gates for a 17-year-old girl. It was August 1980, on Eleanor's 31st birthday. 3 people were in their living room. Julian and Isabella sat side by side on the sofa. On his wife's birthday, her husband's mistress was in their home. Julian began to praise Isabella in front of Eleanor. "She reads philosophy, you know. At 18, she can discuss philosophy. Isn't that amazing?" That day, the 3 of them were discussing a novel, one that Eleanor had originally recommended to Julian. When Eleanor offered her interpretation, Julian turned to Isabella and said, "See? I told you she says boring things." Eleanor would never forget that moment. I understood it clearly then. Julian had finally changed his opinion of me. The man who had cried, "You knew, and you still stayed with me," had, 7 years later, come to call her a woman who says boring things. The woman who protected his secret, the woman who saved his career, the woman who bore his child, the woman who cooked for stars. That woman had now become a woman who says boring things. In 1981, Julian moved to a new production company, taking Isabella with him. Everyone in the industry knew about their relationship, but Julian wouldn't file for divorce. The reason was Chloe. He couldn't bear to make her a fatherless child, just as he had been. He himself had grown up without knowing his father's face. He didn't want his daughter to suffer the same pain. He wanted to keep both his wife and his mistress. But Isabella would not allow it. She refused to remain a mistress. One day, Isabella showed up at their house. Eleanor was in the living room with Chloe, who was only 4 or 5 years old. Isabella screamed, "If I can't marry you, I'll kill myself." And then she cut her wrist, right in front of Eleanor and her young daughter. Julian crumbled. He fled the house alone and drove towards the coast, to Blackpool. It was nearly 300 miles from London. What was he thinking during that long drive? When he reached the shore in Blackpool, he stood there for hours. He later said he heard his mother's voice, the voice of the mother who had raised him in Liverpool. If he died, his family would grieve, and he would be subjecting Chloe to the same fatherless fate he had endured. If you have the guts to die, you should have the guts to do anything, he thought. Julian walked away from the coast having made his decision. He would leave Eleanor. He would choose Isabella. He would make his daughter a fatherless child. He would force his own fate upon her. Even so, he chose Isabella. On the 24th of December 1981, Christmas Eve, the day before Chloe's 5th birthday, Julian and Eleanor filed for divorce. Julian made only one condition, that his daughter would keep the Croft surname. Eleanor agreed. It is her real name, after all. It's something we decided when we separated. A 10-year marriage was over. The woman who knew his secret, who guarded his secret, who saved his career, walked out of her home on Christmas Eve, the day before her daughter's birthday. But even after the divorce, their relationship as a trio was not over. Strangely, every Christmas, Julian, Eleanor, and Chloe would have dinner together to celebrate Chloe's birthday. They did this every year from 1982 to 1988. Even after the divorce, he never missed celebrating his daughter's birthday with the three of us, and he poured his affection into her. Why would a woman who had been betrayed and abandoned continue to meet with her ex-husband? Eleanor didn't want her daughter to hate her father. I didn't want her to hate him, so I told her, "He loved you so much, he always paid for your upbringing." She didn't want to show her resentment to her daughter. She didn't want her daughter to hear her speak ill of her father. So, every Christmas, they continued to meet. They sat together and had a meal, with smiles on their faces. That was the path Eleanor chose. After quitting acting, she began working as a scriptwriter, ghostwriting for a famous author. She raised Chloe as a single mother. The last time the three of them met was in December 1988 for Chloe's 12th birthday. 11 months later, on the 6th of November 1989, at 6:45 p.m., Julian Croft died in a London hospital. He was 40. Eleanor and Chloe were not allowed inside the hospital. Eleanor later said, "I didn't understand that the cancer was that advanced." Julian had kept his illness a secret too. His first secret was his background. Eleanor knew. His second secret was his cancer. Eleanor did not. The last time Chloe spoke to her father was on the phone. "Work hard on your exams." He had promised her a present from New York. That promise was never kept. Many fellow actors attended the funeral. His co-star from Chronicles of a Detective collapsed in tears before the coffin. A rival actor from his generation wept while holding the second wife's hand. According to a close friend, Julian fought until the very end, at one point even ripping out his own IV drip. A veteran character actor lamented, "A man's life is a completely unreliable thing." That actor himself would die of stomach cancer the following year. Daniel, his best friend, was also at the funeral offering condolences. On that day, neither of us was in a state to exchange words. Was Eleanor at the funeral? She has not spoken much about it. But one thing is certain, she saw Daniel offering his condolences. Chloe learned the details of her parents' separation from television and magazines, not from her father or mother. Eleanor told her daughter, "He loved you so much. He always paid for everything you needed." Chloe's response was, "That's what he was supposed to do. You don't get praise for doing what you're supposed to, and doing what you're supposed to do doesn't mean you get to be forgiven." Chloe did not easily forgive her father. As a teenager, she received offers to enter the entertainment industry. She refused. "I had a very strong desire not to be known as Julian Croft's daughter." After graduating from university, she got a job at a regular company. She married and had children. She chose to live a quiet life, completely separate from the world of show business. There are almost no public photos of her. The only image the world has of Chloe is the illustration of a 6-year-old girl on the cover of that 1982 album. Eleanor has said she chose to live in a world completely unrelated to entertainment and has lived her life as a professional. She is already married with children. I have reported this at Julian's grave. I'm sure he would be happy for her. In November 2021, a memorial was held for the 32nd anniversary of Julian Croft's death. About 60 people gathered at a church in London. Famous actors, his friends, and the 3 children he had with his second wife, who had all become actors themselves, were in attendance and spoke about their father. The parting gift for attendees was a special blend of coffee, a nod to the coffee Julian's character drank in Chronicles of a Detective. Daniel, his best friend, was now 69 years old. Even after 32 years, he came to mark the anniversary of his friend's death. But Chloe's name was not mentioned in any of the reports. After 32 years, Daniel came. Chloe did not. After Julian's death, Eleanor began to walk the path of a writer. The catalyst was an author who was planning to write a book about Julian. He approached Eleanor for an interview and showed her his manuscript. He recognized her talent for writing and encouraged her to write her own story. In 1991, Eleanor, using a pen name, published Eternal Provocation, putting her days with Julian into words for the first time. She went on to have a successful career as an author and screenwriter. In 2008, Eleanor published an explosive memoir. In this book, for the first time, she revealed everything in detail. Julian's traveler background, his upbringing in the Liverpool boarding house, the process of erasing his past. She brought the secret that Julian had tried to take to his grave out into the light. Why did she do it? Only she knows the answer to that question. Julian Croft, the man born in poverty, who never knew his father, who hid his heritage and became a star. He lived with a secret, terrified of being known. Eleanor Vance, the woman who knew everything and continued to support him, who was betrayed, and yet continued to meet him every Christmas. She hid her resentment. For her daughter's sake, she kept smiling. Chloe Croft, the daughter who chose to live a quiet life, hiding her identity as Julian Croft's daughter. She held on to her pain and kept her distance from the world of fame. All three lives were shaped by their own secrets. Julian kept his secret out of fear. Eleanor guarded hers out of love. Chloe chose hers out of pain. Christmas. The day Chloe was born, the day her parents filed for divorce, and the day the three of them met for the last time. Everything converges on that day in December. For those who remember the era of Julian Croft, perhaps this story will be a reason to reminisce with old friends, or an opportunity to share with children and grandchildren who never knew that time.